Today we're going to be looking at solving two-step linear equations. So that's some kind of equation with an unknown letter, an x or a y or similar, and you have to somehow figure out what that letter is worth, what number it's worth. This is mostly a level 5 skill. So what's going to happen in this video, you're going to be shown 3 different ways of solving a two-step equation, and what I'd like you to do is to take some notes on each method, practice them by answering the questions at the end, and decide which of the 3 methods you prefer so that you can use that one when you're in an exam. So the first method is based around a flow diagram, so the idea that things happen step by step. What we're going to do is start with the x and think about what we do to that x as the equation progresses, and we need to use the rules of BIDMAS here. So that tells us brackets first, then indices, which are powers, division, multiplication, addition, and then subtraction. So in this equation, 3x plus 2, the first thing we do is to multiply by 3. Okay? And then the second thing we do is to add 2, and that gives us an answer of 17. So we start with x, we times it by 3, we add 2 to the answer, we'll get 17. Hopefully now you can see this is why this is called a two-step equation, because there are 2 things that you do to the x value to get to the answer. If we want to find out what x is, we can work backwards. So where we added 2 when we were going in the normal direction, when we work backwards we're going to do the opposite, which is to take away 2. When we originally multiplied by 3, we're going to do the opposite, which is to divide by 3. And that takes us back to our x value. So if we want to know what x is, all we need to do now is to follow those steps. So first of all, 17 take away 2 is 15. 15 divided by 3 is 5, so x equals 5, and we have our equation answered. Now this is a really nice method of solution, but it's not very flexible. It only really works with equations that are written in this format. It doesn't help us when we get onto the slightly higher level equations that we'll need to use eventually. So the second method is sometimes called a balance method. So we need to think about our equation as a set of scales, and anything we put onto one side we've got to put onto the other side. Anything we take off of one side we have to take off of the other side. If we times one side by something we have to times the other side by the same amount. This is a very common idea in mathematics, and it works for solving this equation. What we want to do is to try and get the x on its own and take away the things or move the things that are attached to the x and are around the x. So the first thing here that we want to do is to get rid of the plus 2. And the way I'm going to do that is by just taking away 2 from this side, which will just leave me with 3x. If I take away 2 from 3x plus 2, I'm just left with 3x. Now, because I want to keep it balanced, because it's like a set of scales, I have to take the 2 off of the other side as well. If I do 17 take away 2, I get an answer of 15. Now the problem here, I've got 3 times x equals 15, and if I want to get rid of the times 3, I've got to again do the opposite, which is divide by 3. Well, 3x divided by 3 is just x. On the other side of the equation, I'm going to divide by 3 as well. I have to do the same in order to keep it balanced. Well, 15 divided by 3 is 5, so again I get the answer x equals 5. The same equation, so the same value for x, regardless of which method you use. Now, the final method is really very similar to the balance method. It's just a kind of shortcut to using that balance method. It's based on the idea that if something moves from one side of the equals to the other, then it's going to do effectively the opposite thing. So if it's add 2 on one side of the equation, it'll be minus 2 on the other side. If it's times by 3 on one side, it'll be divide by 3 on the other side. So we can approach this equation in the same way. We can take our plus 2 and we can move it to the other side of the equation. So we're going to have our 3x staying where it is. Our equals is going to be the same, our 17 is going to be the same. The plus 2, which has moved to the other side of the equation, is now minus 2. The next thing that you can do is to look at the 3. We want to move that times 3 to the other side of the equation. And when a times 3 moves to the other side of the equation, it's going to become a divide by 3. So the x is going to stay where it is, the equals is going to be left alone. We've got our 17 minus 2, and we're going to now have the 3 which is moved across and become a divide by 3, and I'm going to write that as the denominator of a fraction. That means divide by 3. So if I want to find out x, I just have to do that sum exactly as I've done before. So x is 17, take away 2, which is 15, divided by 3, which is 5. And again, we have the same answer because it was the same equation that we started with. Now this third method is a very, very useful method, and it comes in handy for rearranging equations, changing the subject of equations. But it does take a little bit of practice, so it's probably the most difficult one to get started with, but is very, very useful later on. What I'd like you to do now is attempt these 5 questions. So the first 4 should be relatively straightforward. The 5th one is a little bit trickier because it has some negative numbers and you may encounter a decimal in your answer as well. I don't mind which method you use to answer the questions, but try to use all 3 and decide which you prefer in order to do the last couple of questions. These are all level 5 questions. Once you've done that, look over to the page and there will be a level 6 question for you to have a go at. So in this question, the x's are on both sides of the equation, which makes it a little bit trickier. Try to use either method 2 or method 3 and see if you can use those rules to help you work out the answer to this question. Thanks very much.